Okay, good afternoon. A huge thanks to Mr. John Feiner and Mr. Nick Schifrin for that last elucidating panel. Now I'm very proud to be up here with one of our signature programs, as I briefly mentioned earlier. This is the third class of our Aspen Strategy Group Rising Leaders Program that we commenced 3 years ago. And I'm so happy that they're here. So let's give them a round of applause. And we have alums here, and I tell you what, for those of you who are working in foreign policy and national security, these people are the future across all sectors, whether it's government, military, private sector, media. We got the whole smorgasbord of it all. I mentioned our one report that we had earlier, the Integrated Deterrence Report. We also have another fabulous report that's out today, launched. On the Rise, it's called. It's the papers of all these wonderful young people. They get together, they do our seminar, they come to Aspen, and then they write together, they edit, they work with an editor to make their paper as good as possible. And here we are presenting a few different of the papers on stage today. Much better for them to introduce themselves than me. So we'll just go down, and I'll start with Megan to give us who she is and what she does, and then go down and we'll talk about their papers. Thank you.
I'm Megan Ristine-Bellingham. I work at Bridgewater Associates, and I do business information security.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Peppers. I currently work for Google as a quantitative data analyst. Although, quick disclaimer, I am not here representing Google or Alphabet, and any of the opinions that I express here are solely my own personal opinion.
Very good.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Piazza. I'm an associate professor of political science at the United States Air Force Academy. And also, like Matt, the views I represent today are my own.
Hi, everybody. My name is Keeman Rowe. I'm a Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Department of State. I'm currently a Republic of Korea, so South Korea desk officer, and I focus on the bilateral relationship and trilateral relationship with Japan. Previous tours have included Beijing, Islamabad, Karachi, and State Ops, and the views are mine and don't necessarily reflect those of the U.S. government. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carissa Joy Smith. Similar to my colleagues, the views expressed today are my own. I'm currently Vice President at Fox Corporation. Previously, I served in the Biden-Harris administration at the White House as Senior Advisor of Public Engagement, particularly focused on women and girls equity and health equity. My background also includes a ton of campaigns across this country and what I call real America, up close and personal, but nonetheless really happy to be here chatting with you all.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get down to their very difficult homework that they had to do. That was even graded a couple of times. So, Megan, your paper, Beyond Uniforms, the Case for a Defense Civilian Reserve Corps. Why don't you tell us why you decided to write about this, what it's about, and, talk it up to us.
Great. Well, I feel like I should just jump on the bandwagon here. My views are my own and not that of Bridgewater Associates.
We're still very junior.
That's right. Well, my wonderful co-authors, Sarah Plana and Elliot Silverberg, they work for the Department of Defense, and these views are also their own. But we really looked at a bunch of data from employment, or like the employment data of civilians within the Department of Defense. And we saw a couple interesting facts, although maybe not super surprising. The first being that of the civilian employees at the DoD, almost half are 50 or older, which means that in 2035, I believe, 12 years from now, all will be eligible for on-time or early retirement. We also looked at shifting generational trends within employment, looking at millennials and Gen Z. And millennials and Gen Z are motivated by very different things than Gen X and the baby boomers. They're not looking for that steady financial paycheck necessarily. They really value flexibility. And Gen Z, actually, when looking at previous generations, they are the least patriotic that we've seen thus far. So you take both of these facts, and we realized, something's got to give. The DoD really needs to modify the way that they are looking at talent and retaining that talent. So here comes our proposal that there should be a Defense Civilian Reserve Corps so that the DoD can pull on an auxiliary group of employees, to come in and work on time-bound and discrete projects as the DoD sees fit.
Great. That sounds, we'll go into it a little deeper after we hear about the non-opinion that Matthew expressed in his paper.
Just a personal opinion. So our paper topic, which is policies on some comprehensive energy policies supporting the APAC region, was really a confluence of two different interests. In a prior career, I worked as a geologist in the oil and gas industry, and through my career transition from that industry to more the security sphere, I've retained a almost fascination with the intersection of energy fundamentals and energy security. In partnering with my co-author, Esther Im, whose background is on Asia policy, it felt like a really neat opportunity to scope out some of the energy dynamics across the Asia region, and then really think about how US policymakers might think of our role in supporting energy fundamentals through that lens and in that arena. So there are two kind of takeaways from the thesis of our paper, really that we think there is an opportunity and indeed a strategic interest in the United States considering ways in which it can leverage some of its strengths, including the facilitation of dedicated dialogue, the identification and incentivization of investment opportunities, and the facilitation of knowledge sharing agreements that really target and emphasize near-term energy security measures, particularly around the role that LNG or liquefied natural gas can play, in addition to some of the longer-term, what we think are longer-term commitments around decarbonization and renewable energy development. We think that by identifying and sort of pursuing some of these common alignments, particularly with the trilateral, the United States, Japan, and South Korea, it can help strengthen some of those existing situations that we have in terms of diplomatic arrangements in the region, but also act as sort of the foundation for expanded or new relationships as well.
Great. Thanks. Kelly, over to you, please.
Okay, I'm really thankful to be here and to have the opportunity to talk about Latin America. In these forums, we spend a lot of time thinking about strategic competition and the aggression of hostile actors, and a little bit less time thinking about Latin America. So in the paper that I put together, I developed an argument that we need to intentionally re-engage Latin America. And you might be thinking, based on everything that we've been talking about, why should we be thinking about Latin America? And there are many different reasons why we should be thinking about the region, specifically related to our national interests. First, Latin American countries are increasingly contending with challenges associated with violence and illicit organizations, drug trafficking, things of that nature, which have the potential to transcend borders and boundaries and directly impact the national security of the American public. Second, China is increasingly growing its influence in the Latin American region, specifically in authoritarian countries in the region, and extending its military capabilities in the region. Third, Latin America is home to valuable natural resources and critical minerals that are important to fueling both a transition to clean energy and that are also really important to not only the economic development and growth in the Latin American region, but also our own. And then fourth, due to the democratic backsliding that's taking place in the Latin American region, and recognizing that that has the potential to undermine the American way of life and our values. Also, Latin America wants to partner with the United States and is really excited to do that. And if we have a lot of instability in our own region, how can we be the global power that we need to be to combat the strategic competition and aggression that I already talked about? So I have a kind of three-part proposal as to how we need to intentionally re-engage Latin America. Potentially, this is a little bit obvious, but let me kind of outline these three stages. First, we need to consistently engage with the region. The United States has a fairly checkered history in Latin America, and different administrations have approached the region differently, but we need to try to work across partisan lines, find some common ground, and make sure that we are pursuing those kind of consistent, agreed upon approaches to the region. Second, we really need to listen to our allies and partners in the region, understand what they want, and make sure that they're coming to the table so that we can avoid situations like the 2022 Summit of the Americas, where Mexican president, for example, did not come. And then third, as difficult as it might be, we need to refrain from encouraging or requiring, pressuring Latin American countries to pick a side in this moment of strategic competition. Rather, we need to recognize that they really are, or we really are, their partner of choice, and we really need to focus on developing our capabilities in line with what they want and be consistent with that. So specifically what we need to do is we need to focus on, for example, developing affordable, shareable technologies that our Latin American countries want to compete with Huawei, for example, in the telecommunications space. We need to focus on expanding international, military, and educational opportunities for our partners in the region. We need to focus on our national interests that often align with theirs. And in doing all of this, we'll really be in a position where we can pursue our own interests of security, prosperity, and democracy in the region and at home. Thanks.
Well, your paper must be music to Southern Command's ears. We'll be sure to share it with them because they were in Aspen with us last summer. Keeman, over to you, please. Moving regions.
Thank you. So pivoting to Asia. So our paper with Emma and Brittany is about why the trilateral relationship with Japan and the ROC is important, as well as the other multilaterals in the region, including the Quad. So it's kind of, a lot of people ask why now, and I think President Yoon, the president of the ROC, put it very succinctly when he said that, look, we have to overcome our cultural challenges, Japan and the ROC, our 20th century challenges to address our 21st century challenges, and one of the biggest challenges that they face is a provocative DPRK in the region, as well as China. And so with the United States, they want to align with their values. So it's a value-based trilateral agreement because the situation, the security situation warrants allied coordination. So you have in Europe, of course, Russia's war of aggression with Ukraine, but you also have closer to home PRC's assertiveness in Taiwan, unlawful claims in the East and South China Sea, but even closer to home, as I mentioned, the DPRK provocations, so including missile launches at home and their recent satellite launch. So to address these issues, it's been time for a coordinated response with like-minded partners to align our collective efforts and to advance our security and maintain the international order system in the region. So for the ROC specifically, they're about to be on the United Security Council in January. Japan recently just wrapped up as the president of the G7, but the path forward, I think, is the big question after the Camp David summit in Washington back in August. And so our paper says, like, hey, you need to institutionalize this great work. So that means that it needs to stand the test of time after the Biden, Yoon, and Kishida administrations. They all have elections coming up. And then how to institutionalize that is through, of course, annual meetings with their leaders, but also foreign ministers, defense, commerce, et cetera, national security advisors, but then also at the working level, so peer-to-peer, so my peers all the way up to assistant secretaries and beyond, and also including the private sector as well. There's a continued more increase in consultations, particularly military exercises, coordinated messaging. So you may have seen recently the ROC in Japan with the United States did a coordinated statement on DPRK Russia arms. That is something that really all three of our countries are looking at is the actions of DPRK in the region. And then just recently, a joint statement on cyber activities that the DPRK is doing to fund its malicious activities. So you're seeing more of that, and I think that's the way to go. We recently had all three countries had a sideline meeting off the margins of APEC. So I think continuing all of those at each international forum and keeping the pressure on the PRC as well as the DPRK after every action that they take to show that all three of our countries joined like-mindedness with our values are going to stand up to both of those countries and also remind them that they have an obligation with the United Security Council to call out violations. And then people-to-people ties. So there's going to be a U.S. ROC Japan Trilateral Global Leadership Youth Summit coming up. So really just kind of engaging with the youth of each country to kind of reinforce how important these relationships truly are. And then just continuing with the momentum, we recently, as you know, had the meeting with President Xi, but just continue to keep the momentum going. Even though there's engagement now, I think continue to remind them about Russia, reminding them about helping with checking DPRK is the way to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Keeman. Now on to Carissa, please.
Thank you, thank you. Overall, hello, everybody. So happy to be here. I know I stated that, but saying that again because I am really excited. Our paper actually focused on centering the intersectional contributions and talent of diverse women to strengthen foreign policy and our national security strategy. I want to acknowledge my co-author and partner before getting into the scope of this work, and that's Christina Powell. She's one of our brightest foreign service officers in my cohort, currently serving in the Middle East. And this paper really would not have been possible without her experience and her expertise as well. So I just wanted to give a nod to her on this. Okay, so together we focused on centering the intersectional contributions and the talent of diverse women to strengthen our foreign policy and national security strategy. We recognize that we're currently at a time where multiple democracies are on the brink of collapse, where the conversation of global diplomacy is on the forefront, and where we stand as a nation is constantly in the headlines. Based on what we examined, the inclusion of diverse women across foreign policy and national security institutions based on what we examined, we wanted to also look at how to best respond to imminent threats that affect all of us, but where women and girls, especially of color, often feel the brunt of globally. We examined progress made and reviewed the gaps still present. Upon our examination and the limited data, research, and policy, we found that there is still much needed progress to be made when it comes to women of color. We found some limited data points from the Government Accountability Office, an independent, nonpartisan government agency, and it shows that women of color are lacking from top leadership in the civilian and uniform ranks of the DoD, State Department, Homeland Security, and FBI, and other representing agencies that focus on defense, diplomacy, and intelligence community. We see that there is a disproportionate percentage of women of color serving as flag or general officers in the U.S. Armed Forces. Less than 8% of the senior ranks of the State Department are held by women of color, and they also hold fewer U.S. ambassadorships in both political and career appointments. That is why we are encouraging our institutions to utilize intersectionality as a security enhancing tool. Additionally, we ask that it be coupled with a comprehensive data collection to aid in the removal of systemic barriers to the participation of women of color. Intersectionality is defined or the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything in between that can marginalize people. Gender, race, socioeconomic status, age, ability, you name it, all of it must be considered. In policy, women of color bring perspectives from their intersectional experiences, which allows them to analyze unconventional policy challenges in a critical, innovative way from homogeneous patterns. In practice, women of color have demonstrated the ability to build strong ties with international partners and community leaders from multinational and multiracial communities. Now, with the utilization of intersectionality and the onset of the data collection, we see that as a pathway forward to collecting information on how women of color can be and should be integrated into our institutions. We also recognize these targeted approaches enhance intentional mentorship, sponsorship, exposure, retention, and access to networks that ultimately shape potential opportunities for women of color in the academic, private, and public intersections of the field. In all, we believe in America's leadership on the global stage and its ability to advance our objectives abroad. And with that belief in mind, we want to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency of our foreign policy and national security institutions. We want intersectionality values at the center of elevating, protecting, and trusting women of color. And overall, we know that globally that diversity happens, but inclusion really is a choice. So I say to those who are here in this room today, have you ever witnessed someone who looks like me be invited to the table, but not allowed to eat the same meal? Thank you.
Wow, powerful. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but here's what I suggest. We're having a beautiful reception afterwards in the Seaport Room once we have our last panel over. Anybody with a lime green lanyard is fantastic and fascinating, so I'd encourage you to talk to each other or talk to them for questions. And I have about 100 more questions, but unfortunately, fortunately, our Ukraine panel is next. But please, let's give these guys a big round of applause. Thank you so much for all your hard work. And the whole report is online. Thank you.